Vehicles have been involved in a car crash on the M23, causing Sussex police to close the motorway in both directions between junctions 10 and 11. Emergency services were called around 5:30 this afternoon. Crews are treating multiple casualties. We'll update you on that story as we get it as well. And the cost of the government's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million. That's on top of hundreds of thousands more for each migrant sent to the East African nation. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. There will also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along. Now, massive speech on the steps of Downing Street earlier from Rishi Sunak. But let's put it into a bit of context, shall we? Sir Keir Starmer has lost the feminist vote to appease the trans community. He lost the working-class Brexiteers to appease Remainers. He lost a lot of normal people when he took money from climate lunatics. He lost the Jewish vote to appease vast swathes of the Muslim community. And now he's lost them. Who's he got, really? Where's his solid base? Who are they? Keir Starmer's worst nightmare is about to walk back into Parliament.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
Labour have been absolutely silent on Galloway. And it's very, very telling, isn't it? Compare that to what Sunak had to say today.
And it is beyond alarming that last night the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP.
Keir Starmer simply could not have made the full speech that Rishi Sunak made today. He couldn't say this either.
You cannot call for violent jihad. There is no context in which it can be acceptable to beam anti-Semitic tropes onto Big Ben in the middle of a vote on Israel-Gaza. And there can be no cause that you can use to justify the support of a prescribed terrorist group like Hamas.
And he certainly couldn't say this.
This week, I've met with senior police officers and made clear it is the public's expectation that they will not merely manage these protests, but police them. And I say this to the police: we will back you when you take action.
Calling out George Galloway's views, calling out the old from the river to the sea stuff, calling on the police to ramp it up against protesters and saying he'll deport anyone who comes here with extreme views. Sir Keir Starmer simply could never say that stuff because he knows that around 100 of his own MPs would disagree with him. And Labour has built a voter base of people like that. Therein lies a huge difference between the two major parties and the party leaders. I spoke to sources today involved with the Rochdale by-election. Now, they allege that local drug dealers and gangsters were intimidating voters, that anti-white and anti-Semitic racism was rife, that businesses were threatened with being firebombed if they showed support for a particular candidate, that someone tried to break into the home of the relatives of one of the candidates, their children had to be evacuated, there were threatening phone calls from mysterious foreign phone numbers, and of course, it doesn't take a genius to work out what's gone on with the postal votes, does it? On a turnout of around 39%, supposedly 75% of those votes were postal votes. 9,000 more postal votes than in the 2019 general election. Come on. We know what's going on here, don't we? I mean, the irony overload, I think, is this tweet from Sir Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak is too weak to take on the extremists in his party and too weak to deliver the change Britain needs. My Change Labour Party is ready to deliver for the British people. Sir Keir Starmer has been silent on his own MPs getting hammered everywhere they go. He's been silent on the old marches. He's been silent on George Galloway. The Labour leader is trapped. He simply could not make the kind of speech that Rishi Sunak made today because scores of his own MPs wouldn't want him to, and he'd be slugging off the people that the Labour Party spent years cozying up to. But let's get the thoughts now of my panel, and it is a stellar lineup for you tonight. It is the Spectator's James Heal. I've also got the ex-BBC political chief John Sargent and Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju. Thank you very, very much for joining me tonight. James, I will start with you on the end there. Two takeaways for me from Rishi Sunak's speech. What I've just said there about Keir Starmer potentially not being able to make it. The other one is, should he now apologise to Suella Braverman for saying essentially what she said all along?
Well, that's what some Tory MPs are privately saying tonight, which is that, hang on a sec, Suella Braverman was saying this kind of stuff 5 months ago, and yet what was the response of the Prime Minister was to sack her. And, of course, if you are going to make this kind of speech, it's curious timing, I think, in some ways, coming after the by-election result. Surely you want to do it beforehand. Fine, these all issues involved in the campaign, but all I'd say is that, the voters returned their verdict, and so perhaps I think some Tories would have liked to see a bit more of this a bit sooner.
What do you reckon to it today, Joanna? Do you think he was bang on the money? He's calling for an end to extremism?
Yeah, absolutely. Keir Starmer has been calling against extremism on both sides. And I think that, Rishi Sunak seems to kind of align himself more so with people who have more right-wing views. Obviously, he's part of a right-wing party, but also the fact that he hasn't actually condemned some of the stuff when it comes to Islamophobia in his own party, I think that that's what's quite concerning. So the fact that he kind of very much puts himself on one side and only kind of speaks out when it's to do with Islamists or when it's to do with people who don't necessarily agree with his views when it comes to Gaza, that's quite telling.
I suppose what's also quite telling there, John, is that Keir Starmer is a bit trapped when it comes to calling out some of the views that are at these protests, calling out, for example, the old George Galloway situation. He is in a tight spot at the moment, Keir Starmer.
He is in a tight spot. I would suggest that both party leaders, both main party leaders, are in a very tight spot because traditionally we're meant to support Israel, right? Absolutely straightforward. That's it. Both sides agree. Keir Starmer wants to make sure that he's in that responsible league. But then what's happening is that this is nothing to do with what they're trying to do, but in the Middle East itself, Israel is losing the propaganda war. Now, this is not a matter of right and wrong, what happened on October the 7th. People are seeing these pictures from Gaza night after night after night. And many people are not convinced that this policy is going to work and that thousands of women and children are being killed unnecessarily. Now, that makes it extremely difficult for anyone who takes up the traditional British-America position on Israel. And I'm not saying it's not impossible. No, they plough on. But if you were told, just to imagine, pull right back, there's a by-election being held in Britain, and Gaza is one of the big subjects. Where are people's hearts? Where are people's feelings? Well, lots of them are thinking, gosh, it's horrible in Gaza. I do fear for all those Palestinians. The end. Now, I'm saying, oh, but aren't they remembering October the 7th? Straightforward, seeing it on the television. It happened with America in Vietnam. You lose the television war, you may lose the whole thing.
OK. James, so later on, by the way, I should just tease ahead something. I've got George Galloway's right-hand man later on in the show, and I'm going to be asking him about what exactly he means by the old is Keir Starmer's worst nightmare. George Galloway says he's got 59 candidates ready to stand and they're going to be tackling Labour seats by either costing them the vote by splitting it or just winning outright anyway. Do you think that George Galloway is going to be a massive threat to the Labour Party then?
I do think he will be a threat, and I think what we've seen in recent months is the SNP standing up and every Prime Minister's questions, they level all their questions at the Prime Minister, but of course they're all aimed at stopping Scottish Labour. And I think what we're going to see is a lot more attacks from the left. We're going to see a lot of clips of George Galloway standing up in the chamber, trying to go viral on TikTok and Instagram, etc., closed WhatsApp groups. So I do think he will be someone, because he is giving voice, as John's saying there, to a foreign policy that a lot of people agree with, and also a social conservatism that is not represented in this country right now.
Stick with you for now, because just to return to the actual crux of this, which is the Sunak speech that many people will have seen on the steps of Downing Street earlier on. Some people are saying, right, well, look, he's finally got there. He's finally now got to a similar position that Suella Braverman was, which is essentially these marches are hateful, and if somebody comes into this country on a visa that has got extremist views, we will just deport them. But I think quite a few people are saying, why are you only saying this now?
Well, I mean, I think that on the one hand you can say he had to respond to the result, but I do think Conservatives are saying you could have done a bit more of this sooner, and in some ways it's a bit of a Sunakite kind of problem, really, which is that you come a bit belated to the issue at hand. You then come forth with a bit of a technocratic solution, a framework, and I think the Prime Minister really ought to be doing a bit of a lead on this.
Joanna, he said to the police, Rishi Sunak, today, We want you to not just manage these marches, we want you to police them, and we will back you. He got quite animated when he said that. He was, you know, almost not snarling, that's the wrong word, but he was pumped up. And this is going to be a problem tomorrow, isn't it, on the streets of London, because the police are going to say, all right, well, we'll police these marches, and they'll try, and it will kick off, no?
Probably will, and I think that obviously people will be emboldened by the result in Rochdale and kind of can see that there's other people in the country and there is actually a realistic solution to the problem of Gaza that they've been trying to get via the Labour Party and not quite getting. But I think that, you know, this is almost Rishi Sunak with his back against the wall, because he's got to a point now where he can't silence people, because when they go to the ballot box, they are able to change things and they are able to elect somebody who can actually have a voice for them that they think is credible in the House of Commons. And now, you know, he's basically at the last level where all he's got to do now is get, you know, tougher policing and basically silence them.
All right, both of you want to come
I think the other key thing, of course, is what he's trying to do. Absolutely follows on from what you're saying, Joanna. His job, he now thinks, is we must keep the Conservative Party together. What do we talk about? Let's talk about extremism. Let's talk about...
What does he have to talk about? So he can look outside his window.
I know, all right, but he may. But wait a moment. Suella Braverman has laid down the position, as James says.
Yeah.
He's following her. But why is he doing that? Because he thinks, I must keep the Conservative
Do you not think maybe there's a chance
together.
he's doing it because he thinks this is absolute madness what's happening on the streets of Britain? The people hate it and it can't go on.
I think the most striking thing for me was the fact that Keir Starmer subsequently rode in behind Rishi Sunak's statement, and so I completely agree with it all, because I think that shows that Keir Starmer is, to an extent, boxed in on this.
Yeah.
So he's actually following Rishi Sunak's lead on this particular issue, rather than making known political weather, because, as we've said, for different reasons, Labour can't really talk about some of these issues, and that's why I do think Rishi Sunak, although belatedly, is doing the right thing now.
I think they've both realised that when it actually comes to people voting, you know, people will talk a lot, but, you know, you kind of put your money where your mouth is, and they're voting the other way. And, you know, when it gets to the point of kind of who can we save, who will actually realistically vote for us in the end, they might as well go the other way and actually enforce tougher laws.
Look, this Suella Braverman thing, just to round this off, OK, so it's important to just remember, you know, Suella, all right, she used very strong language, OK, but the actual heart of this sentiment was essentially exactly the same as what Rishi Sunak was saying.
Sure.
Why has she gone? You know, he's now gone... I mean, I think, you know, full
That's
frontal
his
apology.
weakness, though. That's what I'm saying. He's desperately trying to catch up to make sure that he's not too far away from Suella Braverman. And it's taken him, you know, a couple of weeks. All of this strikes me as being the difficulty that Rishi Sunak has with politics. He's good on the grand plans and microeconomics and the budget and all that kind of thing. But when it comes to straightforward, old-fashioned politics, he often simply does not know what to do, and therefore his advisors rush in and say, time for a bit of politics. Ah, yes, I get it.
It's because he doesn't actually agree with Suella Braverman. He's literally, his back is against the wall and he's thinking, what can I do now?
The point for me in all this is the genie's out of the bottle. You know, there was an opportunity. It's like when the first boat started coming across the channel, if Sajid Javid had turned the first one back, we wouldn't have this problem now. And that didn't happen, and here we are. Now we've had march after march after march. We've got George Galloway back in Parliament. We've got all of this stuff, and now you're trying to put a lid on something that is way out there. But anyway, we'll be talking a little bit more about this later on, because still to come, police had to be called to a pro-life society meeting in Manchester last night. We will discuss if free speech is under attack, and we'll talk to someone who was actually at that meeting. Students are revolting. But yes, George Galloway says that his by-election win last night is a nightmare for Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. I'm going to speak to James Giles later, so he was by Galloway's side at the count in Rochdale last night. But first, it's my head-to-head. Nigel Farage says that everyone can see that mass migration is ruining Britain. Is he right? We'll be debating that with two great guests right here in the studio, and yes, at 10 p.m. as well. Serious questions to answer for Keir Starmer with the whole Lindsay Hoyle affair. Interesting development today. Stay tuned.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're on GB News and it is time now for our head-to-head. So, estimates suggest that since 2004, more people have arrived in Britain each year than arrived in the entire period between 1066 and 1950. The transformation has been so off the scale that native Brits are now a minority in several major cities. Nigel Farage argued in The Telegraph today that after the Rochdale/Gaza by-election, everyone can now see that mass migration is ruining Britain. Religious sectarianism taking over small Lancashire towns aside, the idea that immigration is good for the economy is also looking shaky. The IFS warned only last week that Jeremy Hunt's £100 billion tax jump is a direct consequence of record net migration. So look, we're worse off per capita, our public services are crumbling under the weight of rapid population growth, we have a catastrophic housing crisis, and foreign conflicts are playing out on the streets of Britain. Is mass migration ruining this country? Well, here to unravel all of this is former Treasury advisor James Price, who is currently at the Adam Smith Institute, and Robert Bates as well, who's the research director at the Centre for Migration Control. Chaps, thank you very, very much. I'll start with you, Robert. Do you think that mass migration is ruining Britain?
Oh, hands down it is, absolutely. Every metric possible, whether it's culturally, societally, housing, public services, infrastructure. Now we're seeing, you know, the biggest decline in GDP per capita on record. You know, it's successive periods of decline, and people aren't seeing any of the benefits that we have been promised.
OK, I mean, it's quite hard to come back to that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a head-to-head, perhaps we're agreeing in different kinds of ways here. I think we can imagine a world in which migration would be amazing for Britain, right? If the people coming over are all genuinely really high in human capital, a.k.a. they're smart, they're hardworking, they've got great skills, they love this country, they love its institutions, they're desperate to come over here and become British, then immigration would be a total unalloyed good. As it is, it's not that. I don't think that it's completely terrible in every single way. Again, there are lots of people that come who want to become British, who want to work here. Maybe they've got historical, cultural ties from Australia, Canada, America, or they just love it and want to make it their home because they like the business environment and things like that. And I think we've got to get the balance right of quality over quantity.
OK, Robert,
So the fact is, obviously, you can imagine a system where everyone skips around holding hands, dancing around rainbows, and that sounds perfect. But the fact of the matter is now we've seen for 20 years that system just isn't viable. It doesn't exist in the minds of Whitehall Mandarins, as I'm sure you're well aware. You know, the system itself has a tendency towards mass migration as the solution to most problems, and that involves the importation of cheap labour that just doesn't benefit the productivity or the value that's added to the economy.
Yeah, so I suppose, with respect, then, the reality that you've envisaged just doesn't and will not ever exist.
Yeah, I think that we have to be careful of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. If we just pull up the drawbridge entirely, that's not going to fix all of the problems that Robert's rightly pointed out. It's not just immigration, it's not just new people coming over here. A lot of people who are second generation are here and still have lots of these problems, cultural problems. It's not that everybody who voted for that idiot in Rochdale is a first generation person who's just got themselves a passport and a vote. So it runs deeper than that. And in the same time, pulling up that drawbridge will lose incredibly talented people, the people who will found amazing companies, who will fall in love and marry Brits, right? My other half is American. I want her to be able to stay, and I think that she loves this country and her family come from it, all that kind of stuff. So there's a balance to be found there.
Well, let me put this to you. If we are saying, if Nigel Farage is saying that mass migration has ruined Britain, I mean, there are still a heck of a lot of Brits. Are you not proud of anything in this country anymore, you know?
Oh, absolutely. No, I still love aspects of the country. I love the history, the countryside, you know, all those things that were brought up on, the poetry, the plays and things like that. I just feel like where we're heading as a society now isn't as one. As Nigel points out in his piece, you know, society through this mass migration has become siloed. We're seeing communities now congregate around one another and there isn't the same integration and the same, not to coin a term, but British dream.
Is it salvageable then? So if he's saying, if we're starting with the Nigel Farage premise that it has ruined Britain, can we now reverse that?
So, look, we've had 20 years of a pretty drastic experiment now, and I do think that, as a result, we are going to have to take pretty, you know, strident views. We can't really be carrying on with the, hundreds of thousands, 200,000 is somehow acceptable. I think we need to have serious conversations about what level is sustainable and doesn't compound the problems that we are currently facing.
Now, this will be my next point, which is that we are not realistically ever going to find ourselves in a situation where that happens, are we? Therefore, it has ruined Britain.
No, I think ruined is too fatalistic. I think that you can see if we have control of a decent education system, right? Schools actually have got a lot better in terms of what they're teaching kids, and kids are learning more. They're coming out of schools with actual great skills. Why don't people want to send their
kids to state schools?
But actually, state schools have got a lot better, right? So it used to be 2/3 were good or outstanding. Now it's over 90%. I'm definitely able to afford to go to send them to a private school. But there are great schools, right? And so you go in there and then you start teaching good British values. Like Rob, I agree that I'm not a relativist. I don't think other countries are just different. I think that this country is better, but that we've been held back from explaining that to too many communities. As the PM said today, the Prime Minister said today, people are just living side by side. We need to be living together. And when we start explaining the rule of law, that capitalism, that Shakespeare, all these things are better than the alternative, then there's still hope.
People would make the argument that, hey, look, we are culturally enriched. Would you agree?
No, and I don't think anyone seriously in their heart of hearts believes that, to be perfectly honest. I think that's the kind of thing that you might hear in a pub in Islington, but I think if you went anywhere else in the country, you'd be hard-pressed to find the argument that the kind of things that we're seeing, for instance, in Rochdale, is somehow for the benefit of the country.
Was there a moment in time, I mean, you might disagree entirely with that, I don't know, but was there a moment in time where we were in that kind of squiffy little period where we were culturally enriched and everything was nice and it was all right, and now actually that's tipped and we've got Eritreans fighting each other with sticks in places?
Yeah, I think there definitely been bits where we probably all should have woken up a lot more. I think it was the late 1980s when there was a fatwa put out against Salman Rushdie. Yeah. English is his third language, right? An amazing writer, chose to make England his home. It's much better at writing than most Brits are in English, and that people were calling for his death on the streets. At that point there, we could have nipped this in the bud and then maybe gone to that sort of skipping around with rainbows and all the rest of it. Didn't happen then, didn't happen after 7/7 either, and I think you know, we're pointing at there's one particular set of cultural differences that are quite tricky. It's not Islam, Islamism, however, however, is a big problem, and that plays into culture as well as it plays into social issues as well, as the Prime Minister pointed out.
Yeah, look, and we are going to be having a massive conversation about that a little bit later on in the show as well. Huge issues, certainly, when it comes to Islamism, which Rishi Sunak did actually stand on the steps of Downing Street and mention today. Again, begging the question, why were you so bullish with Suella Braverman? And also, maybe you got it slightly wrong with Lee Anderson. But anyway, there we go. Look, thank you very much, both of you. Great stuff there. Former Treasury Advisor James Price, who's currently of the Adam Smith Institute, and Robert Bates as well, is the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Who do you agree with? Is migration ruining Britain? Johnny on X says, you only have to see what it's like on our streets and towns in big cities, and the fact is there's an alien culture and religion now dictate our politics. Well, strong stuff, Johnny. Some people would disagree. Jan says, uncontrolled immigration is ruining Britain. Too many and too fast. Our infrastructure cannot cope, and it's causing deep divisions. Ian says, not a lot of shades of grey in this inbox today, by the way. Yes, Patrick, and anyone saying it isn't is either lying or have their heads buried in the sand. Right, well, there we go. 94% of you say that migration, mass migration, I would like to point out, is ruining Britain. 6% of you say it isn't. So the GBNews viewers have spoken. But coming up, George Galloway says that his by-election win last night is a nightmare for Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. I'm going to be speaking to James Giles, who was by his side at that count in Rochdale last night. But next, ugly scenes in Manchester as a pro-life society attempted to meet. We can just show you a little clip of it now. So I'm going to talk to someone who was at that meeting and ask if free speech is under threat. It's more than just an abortion debate, this, really, which I try to avoid at most times, especially on a Friday night. There's actually a lot more to it than this. It's about whether or not people really should just be allowed to go and meet and discuss their views without a baying mob waiting for them outside. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So, the Manchester Pro-Life Society attempted to hold a meeting last night, and let's just see how they were greeted. OK, so now not everyone would agree with the Pro-Life Society's views, essentially anti-abortion, isn't it? But some of them are clearly outside of the mainstream. Now, should they be able, though, to meet in peace, to just peacefully meet up, have a meeting, have a gathering? Well, apparently not, because the night ended in violence, didn't it? Well, I think we can take another little look at that. We've just become so extreme, haven't we? Inga Botha is a first-year student at the university studying dental hygiene and therapy. Now, she attended this Pro-Life Society meeting. Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to have you on the show. Could you just explain to me, please, exactly what happened? So, and not necessarily just last night as well, some of the kind of abuse and situations that you found yourselves in.
Right, so firstly, university should be a place where you can discuss and debate opinions without the fear of being marginalised or oppressed. What happened last night was completely opposite to that. We were met with a lot of abuse and oppression just for wanting to discuss our own opinions together. And people were getting physical. They were shouting abuse at us. One man even got into my face with his hands and told me to get raped. That's not pro-woman. And it's definitely not tolerance in the slightest.
No, and regardless of whether or not somebody agrees with the pro-life stance or whatever, and let's be honest, it's one of the more contentious views in society. You know, it is a massive dividing point, but regardless of that, I would hope that everybody can agree that, you know, looking a woman in the eye and saying that she should get raped is not really the way to go about doing these things, is it?
No, absolutely.
What else has gone on? I mean, have you noticed then that there's been this huge amount of hate towards yourself and other people with your views?
Yes, as soon as people heard about that we were becoming a society and who was on the committee, we would get messages from the opposing opinion with hateful messages saying we're disgusting, that we're horrible, that we should be ashamed of ourselves. And we're a peaceful society. We just want what's best for the woman and the baby because we believe that all life is precious. And so we've been oppressed for having that view.
And last night, then, just talk me through exactly what happened. So you were having some kind of meeting somewhere in Manchester, and clearly people found out where you were and they decided to dedicate their Thursday evening to hanging around outside and doing things like spitting on you as you left.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so we had just met for an introductory talk explaining who we were, what our opinions were, and that we were not going to become horrible to people who don't have share the same opinions as us. However, we were met with such violence and hatred just for wanting to gather together in a group with our own opinions and debate as to what we actually believe in.
And at what point did you realise that there was a baying mob outside and that the police had to get involved?
Well, as soon as I arrived at the building, there were already huge amounts of people there. I had to squeeze through the people who were shouting and shoving. It was quite a terrifying experience. And I mean, this is quite a far-reaching terror, because it's not just me and the pro-life society who they've terrored. It is also our family, our friends, all the people who love us are now fearing for our safety on campus. As it is, people have already been harassed today because they've been recognized as being associated with us. And this is not how far have we, why has our society become a place where tolerance only extends to those who share the same opinions as you?
Yeah, I would also argue, again, that, you know, all right, these views might be contentious, and it's one of these things that everyone's got an opinion on, one way or the other. But actually, your view is a mainstream view. You know, most religions would share your view. OK, most of the more established religions certainly would share your view. And until really quite recently, it was the prevailing view in society. OK, so you know, the idea now that people should be hammered for it is, I think, a little bit baffling, really. What have the university said about this?
Well, the university, they've been very supportive as to keeping our freedom of speech available. Up until last night, we're not allowed to do any more events until Easter because of the safety risk. And the perpetrators of the violence last night, they're not getting any repercussions.
Yes.
We're not getting any safety measures from the university.
So nothing. Right, so basically, you've been made to delay any future events, and the people who were saying horrific things, which, again, just to remind people, include telling you that you need to be raped, are not going to have any consequences. Any word from the police?
No, not that I know of.
Right.
No.
OK. OK. I mean, again, this is possibly another quite egregious example of two-tier policing, but there we go. All right, well, look, thank you very, very much. I will just ask one final question on this, actually, which is just, look, what would you say to someone who does say, look, you know, the pro-life kind of anti-abortion approach is not really modern, OK? And there are a lot of reasons why someone might want an abortion, including, you know, ironically, given the context of what we're talking about now, some of the things that have been said, you know, rape, for example. I mean, what would your response to that be?
Well, rape is a very violent act done to a woman or a man, but in cases of pregnancy resulting from rape, it doesn't change. The violence of this act does not change the idea and the fact that a life is formed from this. And we can't justify murder just because they were conceived from a horrific experience. Life is precious.
And you guys have obviously got your views, and you know you're not got any intention to go out and start what, I don't know, you know, loudly campaigning outside abortion clinics and things like that. You just simply wanted to meet up and have a conversation with other like-minded individuals.
Yeah, and we want to offer support to women who may want another option other than abortion, because there are a lot of resources out there that women aren't told, and it's because we are silenced.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out on campus, etc., won't it? But I think it possibly does tie into something that many people see, you know, right across the country now, which is the jump to extremity when there's the slightest disagreement. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on, and incredibly brave, again, to put your face forward, especially given what happened last night. And we do, you know, regardless of what anyone thinks of your views or anything like that, I'm sure absolutely everybody wishes you well, and, you know, certainly no harm to come to you or anyone in the society. So thank you very much, Inga. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, look after yourself. Bye-bye. OK, so look, coming up, in my monologue at 10, it's a big one, this. Now, pressure is mounting on Sir Keir Starmer. I have uncovered some claims, and they are just claims, about what the Labour leader said to Speaker Lindsay Hoyle. And there has been an astonishing development in this Hoyle-Starmer saga today. I think, well, frankly, it could be about to get very serious. But my panel will be here with the liveliest our most unfiltered pay-per-view you will get on telly. But next, Tory MP Sir Conor Burns has been accused of fanning the flames of racism by a traveller charity. We will speak to an Irish traveller, and the star of My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding is Paddy Doherty. Do the travellers suffer too much racism, or, as some people think, are they sometimes a bit of a nuisance? I'll see you in a sec.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome along. Look, lots to talk about here because Tory MP Sir Conor Burns has been accused of fanning the flames of racism by a traveller charity. He raised concerns for a new traveller camp in his constituency, and he said that he will not be silenced. Take a look.
They have allocated a site with 15 spaces for what they call the so-called settled gypsy and traveller community. I'm saying, in agreement, I think, with many local residents, that this site here, in the middle of this residential area, is not the right place.
OK, no expense spared on the video. Travellers seem to come under fire a lot, though, don't they? Holiday Park Pontins recently banning a list of surnames that indicate that people are Irish travellers. Can I also just say some of those surnames include incredibly common surnames like Kelly? So, there we are. Wedding venues have also been known to cancel weddings if they get an indication that people are part of the traveller community. But it's not all innocent, though, is it? Because, sometimes travellers have been known to kick up a little bit of a fuss, haven't they? Just like when this fight broke out in a cemetery with machetes. There we go. Yeah, that's right. Just a nice peaceful day out at the funeral there. And in he comes. Oh, there we are. And is that a baseball bat? All right, Look, we get the point, don't we? Sometimes it kicks off big time. Now, what do you think about all of this? Joining me to discuss this is Irish traveller and the star of My Big Fat Gypsy Weddings, Paddy Doherty, who I understand has rather unfortunately just dropped off the line. So there we go. No matter, I've got my panel here. Now, when you initially came into the studio tonight, you had no indication we'd be talking about gypsies, and yet here we are. James, do you think there's a point here from this Tory MP? He's been accused of racism for not wanting a traveller site in his area.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is that I think those concerns are shared by a lot of MPs who will express them either publicly or privately, and I think that's what you see in this year when we're going to have a tight re-election year. Someone like Sir Conor Burns, who is touch and go whether he's going to keep his seat, is clearly going to be campaigning heavily on this issue. And I know it's something that, for instance, Esther McVeigh has talked a lot about before. And so I think MPs are very much sort of dogged and protected their patches, and that's how they'd sell it when they're out on the doorstep.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because, you know, if we flip this on its head and it was, right, well, I don't want this group of 20 houses that's only going to be sold to people of a specific community or whatever. If an MP came out and said, I really don't want that here, then that, I suppose, would be deemed to be out-and-out racism, as opposed to now it's the Irish travellers. It's like, well, you know, they're a nuisance.
Well, yeah, and I think that I'm completely sick of politicians basically using a small group of people as a scapegoat. It seems as if, you know, travellers obviously don't have a voice when it comes to MPs and actual representation. Seems like nobody's actually sticking up for them. And I think that politicians forget that they're actually supposed to be working for all of us instead of kind of adopting this NIMBYism to get political points.
I believe that we might have Paddy Doherty, King of the Travellers. Paddy, yeah, good lad. Hey, fantastic. Good to see you, mate. Thank you very, very much. Look, how bad is the problem of racism against the traveller community?
Well, you see how bad, right? You see him there walking down the street. Well, this is a community. We stand here, but we don't want them. And how dare you want to say about Irish travellers? How dare you want to say that? Really, you're putting us in a different race.
Oh, it's gone again. Oh, well. Look, I think we're going to have to leave it there with Paddy. But we did get the point, didn't he? He said, how dare anyone complain about them? Look, John, I will put it out there. I you know, have had some experience when I was growing up with certain aspects of the Irish traveller community, where moving on to specific fields or things, and, you know, they've not always necessarily treated the area with the most respect, have they? I mean, is it that out of order for an MP to say, I don't really want that here?
No, it can be a problem. I mean, the difficulty is that if they're living a separate life, that they're travellers, they've got their own community, they've got their own vehicles that they bring in. Sometimes they're involved in circuses, sometimes involved in all sorts of things. The kids have got to go to school. All these real-life problems have got to...
well, that's not the problem, by the way, John. Sorry, because they don't tend to.
No, they don't tend
to.
But in terms of trying to integrate them, they don't actually want to be integrated. They want to continue with their lives. And that is up against all the modern things, like, hold on a moment.
Well, it's not that modern
just wander into a perfect campsite and suddenly you arrive, and there is aggression often. So, I mean, it's tricky.
Like it's their way of life, though, and, you know, it's not like they've just turned up 2 seconds ago. You would think that. I mean, I went to a school where there was a traveller girl, and, you know, I understand what you're saying about coming to school and stuff. Yeah. But, like, we need to actually work with the traveller community rather than trying to use them as a stupid kind of political spin.
I think one thing which is fair is perhaps looking at how much Tory MPs are willing to talk about traveller community rather than some of the other communities which have different issues. And I think probably because it's to do with the nature of the traveller community in terms of people coming onto land, etc., that people feel much more able to talk about that rather than some of the issues around integration with different bits of the UK.
They talk about that plenty.
OK, all right. Now, look, what we're going to do is I'm just going to tease ahead with my panel to a topic I'm going to be talking about later on. Now, I'm going to be joined... well, not that long, by George Galloway's right-hand man, the bloke who's been helping him with his campaign and has been pictured next to him at the count, etc. I'm very keen to get your views on George Galloway because he's an incredibly divisive figure. He has now been elected, I believe I'm right in saying this, to as many constituencies as Winston Churchill. He's the only person to do that. Yeah. He is obviously going all guns blazing into Parliament and hitting that absolute sweet spot of the time that is his perfect issue. He's capturing the zeitgeist in that regard, in a lot of senses. James Hill, how big an issue is George Galloway going to be in Parliament, do you think?
Well, he's got one thing Keir Starmer doesn't, which is charisma. And that is going to be a huge weapon he's going to try and levy against the Labour Party, who are now facing, rather than just making this about Labour versus the Tories, it's going to be about Keir Starmer also having to face off against George Galloway. And I'd be fascinated to know, when you interview him later, will George Galloway be running for London Mayor and being a bit of a threat in the side of Sadiq Khan? And that, of course, could be issues for the Westminster leadership if Sadiq Khan starts attacking Keir Starmer's position on certain things.
I'm sorry, but George Galloway has got no chance in London. I just don't think that it's his kind of target market.
We smashed it in Rochdale. I mean, let's be honest, there's a big demographic in London.
No,
I don't think
but I think that...
I don't think he's going to win. I just think he could take votes off Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, he could potentially, but I think that, you know, looking geographically, I think that an area like Rochdale, it's in its left-wing way is a different type of left-wing, I think, to London. I think that the things that they care about, obviously, they share things like wanting a ceasefire in Gaza, but I think also people in London will look further than that because there's been a lot of problematic things that George Galloway has also said.
I think also the point is that what people criticise him for is opportunism. That, you know, over his career, you see him becoming pro-Soviet Union, pro-Russian, pro-Saddam Hussein. So if he's going to succeed over this short term, he's got to say, look, I'm caring about Rochdale. I've got to stick with it. So whatever happens...
Look,
he's rather caught now. You can't suddenly say...
I don't know how caught he is. Because one of his things is cleaning the town hall clock. Right, which you can do on a weekend if you really want to. So there's that. He has also said he's going to boot out a load of councillors. I mean, this is something I'm going to talk to his agent about because I'm not entirely sure how he's going to be able to do that. He's also said, this is where he might be a bit stuck, he wants to save the Dale, Rochdale Football Club. Well, that's quite a big operation.
I think it's Primark has got to come to the centre of Rochdale. This takes a bit of time to make sure that Primark agree.
Well, a maternity ward as well.
No, but I mean, the point, what I'm really saying is it's a very short time scale. Whatever happens, there has to be an election pretty well by the end of this year. If he skips too early, people will just say he's a fly-by-night, don't trust him.
There's an argument to say, James, that Rishi Sunak should just call an election now. Keir Starmer's weak. We've seen what's happened in Rochdale. You know, this is just get it done, put Starmer on the spot, because this Israel-Palestine thing is probably, well, I say it's probably going to die down. That was a bit of a silly thing to say, but it's going to become maybe less emotive in a few months.
And look at the last 4 weeks. You've seen the 28 billion U-turn by Labour, you've seen the Rochdale fiasco, and now you've seen the result. So, you know, there's a sense, before Labour get to fix these issues, why not go now? That's an argument I'm hearing in some bits.
Why not go now? Well, OK.
Because he might lose, that's the problem.
Well, he might lose, but anyway, now, look, Sir Keir Starmer is in big trouble, OK? Devastating allegations about that meeting between Starmer and Speaker Lindsay Hoyle. I will be revealing exactly what those allegations are in just a few minutes' time. Stay tuned, it's big.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There's further hail snow to come for northern areas throughout tonight and through Saturday, and it's going to be staying cold across the UK through the weekend. Low pressure's very much in charge. We've got some occluded fronts wrapped around that low pressure system, and that's where the focus for the heaviest rain will continue to be throughout tonight. So some persistent rain will turn to snow over parts of southern Scotland and then into northern areas of Scotland later on tonight. And then another batch of rain will push into southern areas of England, bringing a risk of some hill snow here. But anything that does start to accumulate should quickly melt as the temperatures rise after sunrise. But it will still be quite a cold start to the weekend wherever you are. Some quite persistent rain will continue across central and eastern areas of England and then into southern Scotland later on in the day. And we'll also see this rain turn to snow across the far north of Scotland, particularly over the Highlands through Saturday afternoon. There'll be quite a brisk northerly breeze across northwestern areas, bringing that chilly feel. And in fact, it'll actually still feel fairly cold out there for many areas. Turn drier throughout Saturday night, so it should be a much drier day on Sunday. There'll still be some mist and fog around and a few showers across western coasts, but I think it will feel much more pleasant in the sunshine with lighter winds and a bit more in the way of sunny and dry weather. However, across the east coast, there could be some rain moving in at times. It looks like it'll stay cold into the start of next week, but temperatures do start to rise from Tuesday onwards. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday, from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means 1 year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase, and that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, is this a lie?
I can categorically tell you that I did not threaten the Speaker in any way whatsoever. I simply urged him to ensure that we have the broadest possible debate.
And your MPs?
Broadest possible debate.
I reveal fresh claims that Sir Keir Starmer has to answer, and...
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
George Galloway is back, and he means business.
We've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats, and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat.
Wow, well, I've got George Galloway's right-hand man on this show shortly, plus...
Good luck. Good luck. Cheers. Cheers.
Prince William's on the booze, isn't he? Toasting Harry's latest loss, maybe. I've got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages tonight with The Spectator's James Heal, ex-political journo chief at the BBC, it's John Sargent, and Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju. And this is a developing story. The latest from Clapham, where there appears to have been a mass shooting. As we understand it, 3 people have been injured. The detail on this is at the moment quite sketchy. We understand that there was a shotgun involved, huge police presence. That's in Clapham, in London, where, of course, you may remember that name from being the scene of the Abdul Azidi acid attack incident. So we will have an update for the very latest on a deeply concerning incident taking place in Clapham. On a slightly lighter note, can you work out what's happening here? Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Huge claims for Sir Keir Starmer to answer. That's next.
Patrick, thank you very much, and good evening. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says democracy is being targeted by extremists. Addressing the nation outside of Downing Street this evening, he warned about the current situation in Britain in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel. He vowed to back police taking action against problem protests and said universities must also do more to crack down on extremism on campuses. In a statement, the Labour leader has backed the Prime Minister's message, calling for unity in the country. Rishi Sunak signalled the government will unveil what he called a robust framework for dealing with the growing problem.
They want us to doubt ourselves, to doubt each other, to doubt our country's history and achievements. They want us to accept a moral equivalence between Britain and some of the most despicable regimes in the world. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect.
Whilst addressing the nation, Rishi Sunak said the Rochdale by-election result was beyond alarming. That's after it was won by George Galloway. The UK's leading Jewish organisation has described the Workers' Party leader as a conspiracy theorist who brings division and hate to every place he's ever stood for Parliament. During his career, Galloway has also presented programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he'll stoke fear and division. An investigation has been launched after 3 people were injured in South London following reports of a shooting. A warning: the following contains flashing images. Around 5 o'clock this afternoon, police said they were pursuing a moped that failed to stop. A shotgun was then fired from the vehicle. At Clapham Common, police say 2 people sustained pellet injuries and a third was injured by the moped itself. The suspects fled the scene. Emergency crews say they treated 3 people at the scene and took 2 to hospital. 2 of the victims were taken to a major trauma centre in the capital. None of the injuries are thought to be life-threatening. The cost of the government's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million. That's on top of hundreds of thousands more for each migrant sent to the East African nation. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. £20,000 will be paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. And the UK's Eurovision entry has dropped.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until the moment?
Ollie Alexander has launched his brand new single Dizzy ahead of this year's song contest, due to take place in Sweden in May. The 33-year-old singer has already enjoyed success with his former bandmates in Years and Years, scoring a combined 5 top 10 UK singles and 2 #1 albums. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
There has been a big claim today, and things could be about to get very serious indeed for the Labour leader. Earlier today, a source contacted me with some astonishing allegations about the alleged conversation between Sir Keir Starmer and the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, as well as the Labour Chief Whip, just before the infamous Gaza ceasefire vote. Earlier today, a source contacted me with some astonishing allegations about an alleged conversation between Sir Keir Starmer and the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, as well as the Labour Chief Whip, just before that vote. The claim is this, that Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Sir Lindsay before the vote and said that Labour MPs could be attacked if Sir Lindsay didn't allow the Labour motion, that the Speaker could have blood on his hands, and asked him if he could live with that guilt. The other allegation is that Labour's Chief Whip, Alan Campbell, told Sir Lindsay that he could not rely on the support of Labour MPs if he wanted to remain as Speaker after the next election. Well, look, if this is the case, it could be very, very serious for both Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Sir Lindsay now has 93 MPs who have said that they have no confidence in him, and today MPs have written to the Speaker to demand a Privileges Committee investigation into what happened. That is the other big development, so I will just reiterate that. Today, MPs have written to the Speaker to demand a Privileges Committee investigation into what happened. So that is the same committee that did for Boris Johnson. That investigation would determine whether or not Sir Keir Starmer has held Parliament in contempt. And if he is found to have done so, the committee could recommend that he is suspended or even expelled from Parliament. Now, it's important to say that whispers of these allegations were mentioned in the immediate aftermath of that Gaza ceasefire vote, and they were denied then. Now, we have put these exact phrases that I stated earlier on to the Speaker's office directly, and we asked them if they would categorically deny that Sir Keir Starmer said those things to Lindsay Hoyle and the stuff about the Labour whip as well. They said to us, quote, no comment. Labour says they are categorically untrue. Many people, however, may wish for a proper, full inquiry to be the judge of that. It is expected that Sir Lindsay Hoyle will not make the decision about whether or not a call for the Privileges Inquiry will take place, because he is obviously caught up in this whole scandal himself. So it is likely that it will be handed over to the deputy speakers to make that decision. Now, they will most likely lean on the clerks for advice, and this is, again, another interesting development in this, because these are the same clerks who warned Sir Lindsay Hoyle not to cave in to Labour over those Gaza votes in the first place. And we know that because the clerks published this letter, which warned Lindsay Hoyle that to bow down to Labour would be a serious break with convention. It is therefore reasonable to expect that the clerks would advise for there to be a Privileges Committee investigation into what went on. It is reasonable to expect that, I think. This could pose a serious problem for Sir Keir Starmer for two reasons. Firstly, there is not a huge appetite from MPs to remove the Speaker, and it is likely that they would be very sympathetic if Sir Lindsay Hoyle decided to say that he was the major victim in all of this and that he was put under unbearable pressure by the Labour leader. The other problem for Sir Keir Starmer is that the allegations put forward by my source today were initially denied by Labour, and in fact they have just been denied again now. Very shortly before we came on air, they just told us, quotes, are categorically untrue. So if they are found to have not been entirely truthful about this, it would place Sir Keir Starmer in a very difficult position indeed. Like I said, we contacted both the Speaker's office and the Labour's press office. The Speaker has said no comment. Labour deny everything. Many people may wish for this to be had out at a proper, full inquiry, swearing under oath. Let's get the thoughts now of tonight's panel. I am joined by the Spectator's James Heal. I've also got John Sargent, the ex-BBC political chief and as well Apprentice finalist, Joanna Jarju. All of you, thank you very much. Look, James, I'll start with you on this. Labour's obviously denied everything just now, just before we came on air. Do you think that we should have an inquiry?
I think there's a very strong case for it. And I would just say that you look at how the Speaker has now lost the confidence of 93 MPs. In 2009, the last time a Speaker quit in these circumstances, it only took 23 MPs. So we're now almost 3-4 times that. And I think a lot of MPs really are questioning Lindsay Hoyle's judgments, and they're saying to me, one more misstep and he's out.
Really?
Well, if they handle something as badly like this, they think a lot more letters will go in that kind of form and sign the EDM like that.
So what do you think, Joanna? Do you think that we should just take Keir Starmer at his word here? His team categorically denying everything. Some people might be pointing out, Boris Johnson was denying a lot of stuff, and then obviously we still get dragged through to a committee hearing, don't we?
Yeah, well, I don't believe this for a second. I believe that Keir Starmer would have had a very impassioned conversation with the Speaker, obviously telling him the risks, depending on which way he made the decision. But I don't think for a second that Keir Starmer would have threatened him and said, you would have blood on your hands. And if he did, I'd be very disappointed, because equally, Keir Starmer would have blood on his hands, because it was his decision to basically push ahead with this and not let the SNP have their day. And if it's between life and death, then Keir Starmer, I would have thought, would have made that decision to let his MPs vote to the nearest thing, rather than protecting himself when people are kind of basically being saying that he's doing this because obviously he's a leader in waiting and obviously he's got to be able to be diplomatic. So I think that, Keir Starmer is an upstanding guy from everything that I've seen, and he doesn't have a history like people like Boris Johnson.
John, this isn't going away. All right, now, there's two important developments today. The first one is now that a group of MPs have written to Lindsay Hoyle saying that they want the Privileges Committee to investigate this. Now, it's expected that Sir Lindsay will recuse himself from that decision. It will go to the deputies. They'll rely on the clerks. Those clerks, I think it's reasonable to expect that they would say, look, let's just clear this up and have this inquiry, right? That is actually really potentially quite a serious situation, because Sir Lindsay from what I can gather, is now becoming more open to the idea of saying, I was put under an immense amount of pressure here, saying that he was a victim in all of this. If he says that as an inquiry, then Starmer has to go, no?
Yeah, I don't think you can say, you know, I was threatened and I'm so weak and pathetic, I agreed. I think that the thing to bear in mind is that all the people involved would know the arguments backwards and forwards. They would know perfectly well that if he agreed to make sure to do what he did do, which is say there's going to be 2 votes on this, he knew that he was going to be in deep trouble. But I think there's part of Lindsay Doyle, I've only met him briefly, but there's part of him which is very much, but shouldn't they all have a vote? You know, shouldn't they just all calm down and have a vote? Now, that sounds reasonable. It's kind of which I can imagine would appeal to him.
If he said, John, if there has been any whiff that Keir Starmer has walked in there and said...
He doesn't need to. Everyone can know that. No, but what I'm saying is that if he walks in, he's threatening or he's making his representations, whatever he says will be along those lines. That's what I'm saying, is that the arguments, they don't need to be spelt out. They don't need to be sort of... And you don't need to say to him, now, look, you realise if we win the next election, you won't be supported. It's as if it's a courtroom. It isn't. It's mates who nudge.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, I get that. But we will know categorically. You know, you were making a point as well. Look, this will be under oath, wouldn't it?
Well, this is the key thing, but of course the challenge between the difference between this and Boris is that Boris Johnson stated on the floor of the House. So we had a record there, you know, statements were in the Parliament, we were all filming it, etc. Whereas this was all he said, she said, you know, behind closed doors, etc. So I think that's what's really key. I mean, I suspect this investigation may well go ahead, but I'm not so sure it's going to find anything.
The shift in dial with this would be, and again, I will stress, the Speaker's office said, quotes, no comment to us.
But I don't think we should read into that. I don't think we should read into it, because if they did come out and say, oh, Keir Starmer didn't say that categorically, then a lot of people would also be arguing, oh, look at him, he's on Keir Starmer's side, he's jumping to his defence.
No, I think a lot of people would...
some people would say that.
Well, OK,
I
was also going to say that Keir Starmer denies everything, but there we go. But no, I think it would have kind of made a lot of it go away, frankly, wouldn't it? But
I think it's up to Rishi Sunak. If Rishi Sunak said, look, either privately or obviously more amazing if he said it publicly, I don't think this is on, I think he's got to go, that would be it.
Yeah, so why doesn't he? Why doesn't he?
Exactly. So, I mean, this is you have to be very close to the game to know who gains and who loses. That's what I'm saying. But if you had one key person, in this case, Rishi Sunak, that would be it. And all this stuff about inquiries and all the rest of it, would just simply... Look, once they got to more than 100 MPs
I think there's a big movable factor in this, and that is Sir Lindsay Hoyle. And if Sir Lindsay Hoyle is, and this is a big if he is now as concerned for his position as I'm potentially led to believe that he is, OK, and he realises that his way out of this is to really say that he was a victim in all of this and that immense pressure was put on him, then... And that is said at any point at a Privileges Committee. That is a very, very difficult situation for Keir Starmer, because whilst he hasn't said things on the floor of the House, he's given television interviews where he's said everything's been fine. And, again, they've just issued a statement saying they categorically deny any of the things that we've put out there. So it would be a problem.
It would be a problem. I mean, I just don't think we'll get there, because I just think, as John says, you know, Lindsay Hoyle can't make himself out to be that weak. But I think, look, the key issue with key weakness for Keir Starmer is that he's seen as inauthentic or weak or slippery in all of this. So if there's anything that says he's been saying one thing in public and another in private, that is very worrying and damaging from a public perspective.
If it turns out, I mean, you know, are you not worried for Keir Starmer's reputation and all this? I mean, surely if he was an upstanding member of society and he's all by the book and he's got nothing to hide, then why wouldn't he welcome an inquiry, swear on the Bible and have it out there?
Well, I think that, you know, like I said before, it depends what was actually said. So, obviously, if a source says that Keir Starmer threatened, for example, it may be that after a bit of investigation, they would say, you know what, you crossed the line, but it wasn't to the extent of threatening him and saying that he's got blood on his hands. I think when you make it sound that bad, then it becomes, you know, a bigger argument than what it actually is.
I think also bear in mind, if Rishi Sunak has decided not to pull the rug from under him, he may want something back. See, the game in Westminster is always, I helped you, you know, there were nearly 100 MPs who wanted you out. I want this done. It's always useful to have something in the back pocket. And now you may say, oh, well, this is all deviousness. It's called Westminster, it's called politics.
And also remember, John, of course, that this week's PMQs, you saw Lindsay Hoyle refused to interrupt every time that sort of Rishi Sunak started having a go at Keir Starmer, who was very muted. So perhaps government is thinking, let's have a better, more muted speaker who isn't going to intervene to get the election.
Because there's some of the alternatives, by the way, are pretty shocking. All right, well, look, watch this space when it comes to it. Again, I will stress, we put all these allegations to the Speaker and the Labour Party. The Speaker's office said no comment when it came to the claim that Keir Starmer went in and was very, very forceful about some of the issues that Lindsay Hoyle may have to personally live with if a Labour MP was attacked. And also, of course, the issue of the allegation that a chief whip went in and threatened Lindsay that the Labour Party wouldn't choose him again as Speaker. They said no comment. Keir Starmer's office have denied this. There are calls now, serious calls, and indeed a letter has gone in to have a investigation into all of this, and I think it's relatively likely that we will. What we get out of this investigation remains to be seen, but it's likely that we'll get the investigation. Anyway, coming up, a shift in tone. A Willy Wonka experience gone wrong, as branded Where Dreams Went to Die, and our future king was seen doing shots in Wales. But next, is this man's Rochdale by-election win a nightmare for the Labour leader?
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
Well, we will ask his agent, his right-hand man, what comes next for George Galloway. Is he going to be a nightmare for Keir Starmer? This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News. Now, as discussed, Workers' Party of Britain leader George Galloway overturned a Labour majority in the Rochdale by-election last night, Labour having withdrawn support for their own candidate after alleged anti-Semitic remarks. Now, nonetheless, Galloway issued a warning for Sir Keir Starmer after his win.
You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, look, during the campaign, George Galloway had said a lot of things. He's going to make the walls of Westminster quake. Subsequently, as well, to that, a little bit later on in the evening, he said that he was primed and ready to go. They had about 59 candidates ready to stand in other seats, and that they were either going to just beat Labour outright or take enough votes off them that it meant that they lost anyway. How big a threat is this for Keir Starmer? Let's speak to someone who can tell us a little bit more. He's been at the heart of the George Galloway story for quite a while. Good to see you. It's James Giles. Yes, so look, is this Keir Starmer's worst nightmare then?
Yeah, Patrick, I really do think it is. There are swathes of constituencies across the country where the majority is not enough for Labour, given their current stance. And I think George is right. There are 60, I actually make it about 80 seats, where an independent or a Workers' Party candidate would undoubtedly sway the result significantly.
OK, all right. I mean, I suppose the question is, what's George going to do on his first day in Westminster? What's his big speech? What's going to happen? What's he got planned?
Well, look, it's customary for the winner of a by-election to be called at the first Prime Minister's questions after their win. And I fully expect George to be on his feet in the chamber in his usual manner and style, in there with a bang to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, especially after his comments this evening.
Well, yes, I mean, we should mention that, actually. So, Rishi Sunak did say that, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said that George Galloway is not a particularly nice chap and was an extremist and was endorsed by Nick Griffin of the racist Nick Griffin of the British National Party. So he mentioned George by name. I believe George has hit back, saying that he doesn't care much for the Prime Minister either, does he? What's George's view on the latest that Rishi Sunak has actually had to say about him then?
Yeah, well, I think George's view is he would say that, wouldn't he? You know, George is a prolific tweeter, social media user, and has several million followers across his platforms, and has hit back resoundingly. You know, there's been baseless claims by many people of, you know, intimidation, aggression. The only crimes reported to the police during this by-election were the case of one nutter approaching Simon Danchuk, and 3 of our banners being criminally damaged and stolen. Apart from that, any other claims are entirely baseless, and clearly the people of Rochdale have sent George into Parliament with a thumping majority.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to just steer away from some of the claims. I'm aware that there is an active case involved here, so let's just let's swerve some of those things. But when it comes to George's potential role in disrupting the Labour Party, when we had this now absolutely infamous ceasefire vote 2 Wednesdays ago now, what happened there was, arguably, Keir Starmer being saved from a massive Labour rebellion, both front and back bench, of, according to The Guardian, around 100 MPs. Well, then if you plonk George Galloway into the middle of those benches, and there's another ceasefire vote, which eventually there will be, then realistically, could we see a situation where a load of Labour MPs end up siding unashamedly with George Galloway?
Yeah, I think we could. There are swathes of Labour MPs who agree almost entirely with what George has to say on the issue of Gaza, but due to the authoritarian leadership under Sir Keir Starmer, anyone who dares speak out, even in the most mild of ways, seemingly gets suspended from their role in the Labour Party. But this result, I think, will make every Labour MP sit up straight and listen, because they know if they don't listen to people, will come the general election, they're going to be in just a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, but the other fact is that Keir Starmer can't really stand up to George Galloway or anyone, can he? Because he is, I mean, he's been trying to cling on to the political demographic that George is targeting anyway. So, I mean, Keir Starmer can't really come out and slam George, can he?
Well, you could say that, but let's wait and see. I'm sure he'll try and find a way.
I mean, you would want him to, though, wouldn't you, is the thing?
Well, no, look, we want George to be able to present his case in Parliament. His views are backed, according to the opinion polls, by the vast majority of the British public, and indeed by the vast majority of the public around the world. People want a ceasefire. People want an end to the killing of innocent women and children. And that's a voice in Parliament who will advocate more fiercely for that, I think, than any other MP currently on the Green benches.
Is he going to run to be Mayor of London, do you think?
No.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Really? Okay, interesting. Interesting. All right, and you think he's gonna stay on in Rochdale, fight the next one as and when we have a general election there? He's not got sights on a safer seat. There's talk of Bethnal Green and all of these places. He's not going to have a bet on that, is he?
No. I mean, look, this. I really don't like talk of safe seats myself. No one is entitled to votes. No one party is entitled. No one candidate is entitled. You have to fight for every vote. The next election, George has already said publicly, will be his last term in Parliament if he's elected. So the way he sees it, it's a fixed term, potentially 5-year contract with the people of Rochdale.
OK, all right. And very final question, James. Is there no concern at all about the potential for a relatively, and I appreciate that what I'm about to say could be taken out of context, a relatively militant base here, right, where people have been accused of, being very agitated about the situation in Gaza. There have been claims of, some quite rowdy support for George Galloway. Do you think that maybe there are potential issues there, that George has really ramped up tensions as opposed to actually, really achieving anything?
Well, look, the man who's ramped up tensions was Azhar Ali, who made a series of crank claims. The man, in his own words, made claims that were stupid, false. These are his words, not mine.
With respect, though, Chris Williamson was on GB News last night and it took him all of about 5 minutes to bring up Auschwitz and make a comparison between that and what's going on in Gaza. I mean, he said there's more people being killed by Israel in the Gaza Strip than were killed every day at Auschwitz.
If I may, yeah. Chris lives in Derby. We're talking about George's election in Rochdale. I was in Rochdale every day, bar a few, when I was down here in London. And I witnessed the campaign firsthand. Any accusations there was anything intimidatory going on, frankly, is for the birds. And it's clearly for the birds, based on the fact that not a single complaint about any of our campaigners' conduct was questioned or complained about.
OK. All right. Look, thank you very much, James. I do hope to talk to you again in the future, because this is going to be big news for a long time. The fact is, you put George Galloway in somewhere, and a lot happens. A lot happens. Look, take care, James. All the best. That's James Giles there, George Galloway's agent. Right, OK. Coming up next, my panel are here with the liveliest, most entertaining pay-per-view you will get anywhere on the telly. And important as well to say, yes, we will be digging into why there are no women on the ballot in the Rochdale by-election. We're going to be talking about that. I've just been reminded in my ear now to also say a very serious story, this. Yes, it's the latest on this mass shooting in Clapham in London. We are going to be giving you up-to-the-minute updates on that. As we understand it, about 3 people have been injured. Look, stay tuned. I'll have more detail when I come back.
In In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals. We've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. There'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, it's time now to bring you a first look at tomorrow's front pages. Let's do it. OK, so we go to the Daily Express now. We'll beat this poison. In a landmark speech, the Prime Minister calls out the shocking increase in extremism threatening to tear Britain apart. He delivered that on the steps of Downing Street earlier today. The next paper we're going to be showing you is the Daily Mail. Rishi delivers speech Britain needed to hear. This is by Quentin Lett. After Galloway's alarming by-election win, the PM's powerful and personal attack on extremists trying to tear us apart. So that's, again, leading the agenda there. The Eye, well, there's a theme here. Starmer tells UK, I'm sorry about Galloway. Labour leader apologises to the voters of Rochdale. Obviously, again, Rishi Sunak giving his speech a bit earlier on. Let's go to the Mirror. Jerry's texts turmoil. Husband's flirty chats go viral as she's en route for show of solidarity. That's awkward, isn't it? Jerry Horner was flying to join her husband Christian in Bahrain when apparently the alleged flirty texts emerged. The Daily Star. Why the long face? Cops deployed giant 6'2" farting horse to wipe the smile off thugs' mushes. And yet again, the Daily Star cover the story that everyone really wants to hear. OK. Look, just before I go to my panel on that, I do want to bring in, I believe, our Home Security Editor, Mark White, who is going to be telling us the very latest when it comes to a concerning and, as I understand it, ongoing incident in Clapham. Mark, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So what is the latest in what's happening in Clapham, please?
Well, more violence on the streets of the capital tonight. An incident that unfolded at rush hour in Clapham, the south side of Clapham, where police were in pursuit of a moped with 2 suspects on board. Now, according to Scotland Yard, this moped had failed to stop. We don't know why they were trying to stop that particular moped, but they were in pursuit of it. Then at one point, one of those on board the moped apparently fired what's believed to have been a shotgun towards the pursuing officers, but it actually missed and managed to go through a pub window, the Bellevue pub in that area. At least one person, possibly 2, inside the pub were injured, suffering shotgun wounds. Another person was injured outside on the street, struck by the moped. Now, the injured have all been taken. All 3 people have been taken to hospital, 2 of them to a major trauma unit. But we believe at this stage that the injuries are not life-threatening. But a very serious and worrying incident. There was a very significant police and ambulance and other emergency services response to this, as you would expect, right in the heart of rush hour in a busy area of London. Concern, of course, that this may have been terrorist related. The latest I'm hearing from sources is that it wasn't a terror related incident. We can notch it up to yet more violent crime in the capital, and that will pile more pressure on the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who's already been criticised of late with him passing a grim milestone with 1,000 people killed in the capital since he became the Mayor of London.
Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Look, thank you very, very much, Mark. Great to see you. Great to have you on the show. Yeah, concerning events there in Clapham, although it does thankfully appear not to be terror-related. Very little consolation to all of the people injured, of course. But let's tackle now an inside story. So it's one of our regulars, Alison Pearson. She was on my show last night, and she was on our by-election coverage last night as well. She was pointing out that there were no women on the ballot in Rochdale. 3 of the female MPs that we do have need extra security due to heightened security concerns since the Gaza attacks. The concern that Alison Pearson was sharing was another idea about whether or not women in certain communities, i.e. the Muslim community, let's be honest with what she was saying there, are going to have enough democratic representation. And certainly when it comes to things like postal votes, if you're in very patriarchal home lives, are you always voting the way that you want? Alison Pearson, this is an issue very, very close to her heart. Joanna, do you think that we do have enough women in politics? Do you think when it comes to some of these areas that we're seeing now, like Rochdale, or where it is specifically designed to get the quotes-unquote Muslim vote, is that going to be an issue when it comes to standing female candidates, do you think?
Potentially, but I do think that, you know, when we look at the House of Commons, 35% of MPs are women, and I think that it's at a record high now that we've ever had more than 1/3 of the House of Commons being women. So it is rising, but at the same time, it's not exactly 50-50, is it? So there's still a lot of work to do. But at the same time, I think that it will be extremely difficult for a woman of colour to be in politics. I actually studied politics at uni, and by the end of it, I looked at all the female of colour and how they're treated, and I thought, no, I'm not doing it. You know, I think in 2019, a black woman MP got 90% of all online hate. So you've also got to look at the wider ecosystem of how female politicians are treated, whether they're white, black or Asian, but also female politicians of minorities, how they're treated as well.
So it's so basically, it's tricky enough as it is, would be my takeaway from that. And if we are adding certain things about, you know, additional pressures, we're trying to appeal to the maybe more hardline elements of the British Muslim community. Do you think that could pose a problem for female representation, John, or not?
Well, I think the whole area is extremely difficult, and there's no doubt that more and more women MPs are saying how difficult their lives have been, and now we hear they give them special protection. So it does look as if the situation's not getting better, which it seemed for such a long time. The other thing that's happened is that Labour have made quite clear that in this general election they will not be having all women shortlists.
Yes.
So that was the big thing that made such a difference.
Well, that was a point that was made last night, actually, which is that Labour have had all-female shortlists, and then something that's almost quite, I think, conspicuous, which is that they are not doing it.
They're not doing it this
election.
time, no, because they think it's against the law now.
Well, yeah.
Law has changed.
But they certainly didn't do it in Rochdale. What would your takeaway be for this, do you think?
I think in some ways we can be looking at the wrong end here, which is that on the one hand we can obviously provide MPs with bodyguards, female MPs with bodyguards, give them all the protection they want. But actually that's not kind of looking at the issue, which is who are the people putting out this kind of hate and the perpetrators, etc.
Yeah.
And I think the full force of the law needs to be brought down on them. And so it's not just about protecting the women from anything like that, like sort of abuse, etc. They'd have to sustain any of that. But it's also about finding out, rooting out the people who are putting out hate, online and offline, and finding them.
I think one of the points that Alison Pearson was making was none of the candidates were female last night. When you do look around at a lot of these rallies that we were seeing from the likes of George Galloway, etc., there were not a huge amount of women in the crowd either. It was a very, very male-dominated thing. Is that a sign of things to come?
Why bring it up now? This is what irritates me when there's a big issue like this.
Well, because people didn't want to be called racist.
No, but all of a sudden now we want to be feminists. When these women are being called, letterboxes and things like that, people like Alison Pearson don't jump to their defence. But when it's time to give a cheap shot at the Muslim community to basically say that, there's a patriarchy there.
I'm sure Alison Pearson, who's not here to defend herself, would say that she's always been a proud supporter of women's rights. Now it's time for a very quick viral video. What on earth is going on here? OK, so that man there thought that it would be better to haul his body up the handrails than walk on a stairway painted with the pride flag. Read into that whatever you will. Look, coming up, we have our panellists give their greatest Britain Union jackasses, with one nominee being the Rochdale by-election runner-up, soon to be a household name, no doubt, is David Tully. And, of course, we will also be showing you exactly what went wrong at a catastrophic Willy Wonka experience. I'll see you in a sec.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seemed to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
All right, OK, welcome back. Now, we just go to a couple more of your front pages. Let's do it. We have got the Daily Telegraph. Democracy under threat. PM urges nations to come together against the poison of right-wing and Islamist extremism. And the other story at the bottom there is defence spending budget must rise, Shapps told Hunt. Next, we have got the Times. Banish this hatred from our streets, implores PM. You know what? Look, nothing's going to happen though, is it? Tomorrow, we're going to see the marches. Rishi Sunak has laid down the gauntlet to police officers saying, we will back you to police these marches, not just manage them. What are we going to see tomorrow? Exactly the same stuff. But anyway, let's go to the Sun. Jerry's sex text flightmare. Spice mid-air. Oh, grief. As messages went global. Right, OK, so look, basically, we know that there's been this scandal with the Formula One bigwig, and apparently he's been sending sexts, and those sexts, allegedly, were published whilst Jerry was mid-flight, and we can't have that. The Guardian. Democracy is under threat from extremists, says Rishi Sunak. And a bit there on Navalny's funeral. Thousands brave threats of arrest to say goodbye to Navalny. All right, OK, so those are your front pages. Right, I'm joined again by my press pack, of course. We've got John Sargent, we've got Joanna Chaju, and we've got James Heal. Now, look, the front pages have been quite heavy. We've also done a lot on Rishi Sunak and what he said earlier on. So I just thought I would bring people something. It's Friday night, after all. Another little viral video. So a Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow for families turned into a dreadful day out with uninspiring props, lacklustre surroundings, no golden ticket atmosphere, that's for certain.
I'm not joking. I paid £40 a ticket for this. Smallest bouncy castle in the world, and I bet we have to pay for that food over there. These are like the photo bits there.
Yeah, literally just a warehouse. They paid money to go to a Willy Wonka immersive experience. It's a warehouse and some terrible actors. It reminds me a little bit of a certain Windsor Wonderland experience that people had, where the elves were outside smoking cigarettes, Santa was drunk, and the reindeer was just an Alsatian wearing antlers. But let's take another look at another viral video now. Prince William has been out and about in Wales today, and he's been on the shots.
This is much easier. Pour a shot before all's whiskey. That's a better idea. I like the strongest one. Wayne, would you like a shot? I'll drink with you. Good luck. Good luck. Cheers. Cheers.
OK, so William appears to be bouncing back. Good to see him out and about, getting on the shots, you know. I suppose he could be toasting Harry's latest court defeat, couldn't he?
Yeah, and marking St David's Day in the appropriate style. Although I will say that pint was the most appallingly poured I've ever seen. It's enough to make you into a Republican. You know, I think the first thing they ought to do tomorrow is train him up how to pour a proper pint.
Train him out to pour a pint. There were concerns, John, though, weren't there, because Harry had to pull out of, well, or did pull out anyway, of King Constantine II's memorial service due to personal reasons. Kate still not been seen for quite a while. They issued a statement earlier on saying, oh, look, we've told you that she's not well, back off. But I think the problem with that for me was that they did tell us that the time frame, well, we've exceeded the time frame, really, that they hinted that she will be back out and about now, so...
Yeah, there's no end to this. I mean, there comes a point where if you said, OK, let's go into more detail about the King's cancer, then I know what we ought to do. Can we interview one of the doctors that treats him? Can you go on doing this? Can we check how much chemotherapy he's had? The questions would be endless. So wherever they've got to in terms of transparency, wherever they've got to in terms of let's be straightforward about illness, there comes a point very quickly, as we've seen, where in fact you've got to bring it down and say, no, this is a private matter. We're not going to give you what they say in Number 10 all the time, no running commentary. And that is correct. And people have got to expect that they will not know in great detail about all these things. If somebody says, for personal reasons, I'm not going to a memorial service, that is it.
I would like to see William and Kate and all of the rest of the family treated exactly the same as how they treated Meghan and Harry when they were working royals. I think it's got to a point now where Harry is used so much as a scapegoat that now William can basically do whatever he wants, you know? And I'm not saying that he's not going through a really difficult situation, but if Harry had cancelled an engagement, something like that memorial, an hour before and then was taking shots the next day, Harry wasn't even allowed to give out an award at the NFL awards without him apparently being called insensitive. So I would just like a little bit of accountability, and I think that, you know, William now is kind of riding, you know, the wave of the
Do you not think that, I mean, his dad's got cancer, his wife's clearly very ill. And
I'm not saying that he's done anything wrong. I'm not saying that, you know, him taking the shot has personally offended me. What I would like is for him not to feel as relaxed enough to kind of feel as if he can kind of do whatever without any type of accountability.
I mean, some people might say, well, the second that Prince William releases a book slamming his own family, then maybe he will get that kind of scrutiny. But, hey, that would just be some
Harry and
people.
Meghan were getting that before the book.
Would just be some people. Now, let's go on to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union Jackass. All right, OK. John, I'll start with you. Can we start with your greatest Britain, please, mate?
Greatest Britain, David Neal, the sacked independent inspector of borders and immigration who forced the government to publish his reports on the failings, the really bad failings, of our immigration system. So there's someone who did good.
All right. Go on, John.
Mine is Tracy Braben, the wonderful mayor of West Yorkshire, where I'm from. She hosted the Convention of the North yesterday and today. I was there. It's amazing. And she's been advocating for better outcomes for people and businesses in the North. And that's what we need, actual real levelling up. That's what I actually saw there today.
Good.
And Michael Gove, no.
OK, fine.
Just a pack of lies today.
All right, OK, go on.
Mine is the man who finished second in the Rochdale by-election, David Tully, well-respected local businessman who I think was the voice of the conscience of Rochdale. And I'm sorry he finished second, and I hope he stands again and wins next time.
All right, well, your winner is David Tully. There we go, yes. Although I must say the West Yorkshire, was it Mayor?
Yeah, Tracy.
Yeah, it was a close second on that one.
Can I just say I wasn't having an outburst about Michael Gove. It's because he did a speech today and Angela Rayner did one.
Look, you would not be the first person on this show to have an outburst about Michael Gove, so don't worry. Right, Union Jackass, we're going to have to rattle through these quickly now.
We're Union Jackass. David Collins, the head teacher of Noel Academy, Kent, who allowed girls of 13 to wear false eyelashes at his school, and the grounds that he gave was that they might refuse to go to the school if they weren't allowed to wear false eyelashes. And these kids are 13, for goodness sake. Get a grip.
Yeah, serious questions there. Go on, John.
Mine is Rishi Sunak. I think this might be the third time for being a massive hypocrite, coming out on his podium and preaching when he doesn't even practice what he preaches when it comes to his own party and people being racist and extreme.
Oh, strong stuff again, just lobbing it out there, right?
And for me, it's Billy Cole, who is the organiser of that absolutely terrible Glasgow Willy Wonka experience. Yes. And I think, for me, this is the grift that keeps on giving, and I look forward to seeing many more pictures of this terrible event.
I just think the bottle on that guy to go, right, this is rubbish. I mean, there was a bit of it where there was just a woman hid behind a mirror and then she comes out. Anyway, right, your Union Jackass today is the incredibly ropey teacher that decided that he wanted 13-year-old girls to wear fake eyelashes at his school. OK, all right, guys, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the panel this evening. I've really enjoyed being with you this week. I will see you on Monday morning. No, I'm doing breakfast on Sunday anyway. It's headliners.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There's further hail snow to come for northern areas throughout tonight and through Saturday, and it's going to be staying cold across the UK through the weekend. Low pressure's very much in charge. We've got some occluded fronts wrapped around that low pressure system, and that's where the focus for the heaviest rain will continue to be throughout tonight. So some persistent rain will turn to snow over parts of southern Scotland and then into northern areas of Scotland later on tonight. And then another batch of rain will push into southern areas of England, bringing a risk of some hill snow here. But anything that does start to accumulate should quickly melt as the temperatures rise after sunrise. But it will still be quite a cold start to the weekend wherever you are. Some quite persistent rain will continue across central and eastern areas of England and then into southern Scotland later on in the day. And we'll also see this rain turn to snow across the far north of Scotland, particularly over the Highlands through Saturday afternoon. There'll be quite a brisk northerly breeze across northwestern areas, bringing that chilly feel. And in fact, it'll actually still feel fairly cold out there for many areas. Turn drier throughout Saturday night, so it should be a much drier day on Sunday. There'll still be some mist and fog around and a few showers across western coasts, but I think it will feel much more pleasant in the sunshine with lighter winds and a bit more in the way of sunny and dry weather. However, across the east coast, there could be some rain moving in at times. It looks like it'll stay cold into the start of next week, but temperatures do start to rise from Tuesday onwards. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel, and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says democracy is being targeted by extremists. Addressing the nation outside Downing Street this evening, he warned about the current situation in Britain in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel. He vowed to back police taking action against problem protests and said universities must also do more to crack down on extremism on campuses. In a statement, the Labour leader has backed the Prime Minister's message, calling for unity in the country. Rishi Sunak signalled the government will unveil what he called a robust framework for dealing with the growing problem.
They want us to doubt ourselves, to doubt each other, to doubt our country's history and achievements. They want us to accept a moral equivalence between Britain and some of the most despicable regimes in the world. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect.
Whilst addressing the nation, Rishi Sunak said the Rochdale by-election result was beyond alarming. That's after it was won by George Galloway. The UK's leading Jewish organisation has described the Workers' Party leader as a conspiracy theorist who brings division and hate to every place he's ever stood for Parliament. During his career, Galloway has also presented programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he'll stoke fear and division. An investigation has been launched after 3 people were injured in South London following reports of a shooting. A warning: the following contains flashing images. Around 5 o'clock this afternoon, police said they were pursuing a moped that failed to stop. A shotgun was then fired from the vehicle at Clapham Common. Police say 2 people sustained pellet injuries. A third was injured by the moped itself. The suspects fled the scene. Emergency crews say they treated 3 people at the scene and took 2 to hospital. 2 of the victims were taken to a major trauma centre in the capital. None of the injuries are thought to be life-threatening. And a driver has been rescued from the cab of a truck that was left dangling over the edge of a bridge in Kentucky in the United States after her vehicle crashed through a barrier. The woman was miraculously unharmed. Video shows rescue workers descending to pull her out of the cab. She was back safely on the bridge in about 45 minutes. Attention now turns to how to remove the truck from its position as it hangs over the Ohio River. It's not yet clear how the incident happened. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your run through tomorrow's newspapers with 3 comedians. I'm Leo Kirsten. Tonight I'm joined by